Okay, now it's working. So I have this great privilege today that I would like to introduce to you Bernhard. I guess the Bernhard knows everybody, but for those that may be new to HD, Bernhard is a professor of neurology at the University of Ulm and a neuroscientist specialized in Huntington disease. And he's the founder of the European Huntington Disease Network in 2004. And he was also the chair of the EHDN Executive Committee till 2014. And he's also the founder of the first observational study registry, and I think it has to be said that his second baby, Enroll HD, is celebrating 10 years now today or this year. And I guess we could go like over hours with achievements from Bernhard, but I will let Bernhard talk because he could need one more minute, probably.
Thank you very much, Alzbeta. So I first of all would like to thank Tess for allowing these insights. I think it's indispensable for all of us, and the openness to share is so important. And this difficulty with getting along with the situation, with yourself as well with other people, and it is very, very important insight. So thank you. So I'm actually not here. Steve McKenna is here, so a person with more gravitas than me. And I'm filling in to change gears a little bit and to talk about quality of life and PROMs, that stands for patient-related outcomes, and trying to take up what Tess related to us in a way that can inform us professionals whether what we are doing is helpful or not. So what I'm going to talk about is to give you a little bit of a background of the quality of life instrument that is developed in the context of a project called Healthy R&D. I will discuss with you various concepts of quality of life measures and introduce to you the so-called needs-based theoretical model. And then I will introduce you to the current status of these need-based quality of life instrument in Huntington's disease, where we are, what the validation is, and the application that we are envisioning for it, and the hope that this will capture patient value. So here's the context. Healthy R&D is a project within the Joint Program for Neurodegenerative Disorders, and it is trying to develop a model of digital augmentation of care for people living with Huntington's as well as their partners and caregivers. And the idea is to follow a principle of user-centered design. In this, you see the various countries that are involved. Can you see my pointer? Not really. Yes, now you can see my pointer. Okay, and so it reaches from Scotland to Sicily, the contributing countries. What I'm going to talk about within this larger project is the first model called HD Needs, the development of a need-based quality of life instrument. The aim of that project is to develop 4 measures, one for persons with manifest Huntington and their companions and caregivers, as well as instruments for persons in an earlier stage of Huntington's disease and their companion. It's currently in 4 languages aside from English, so it will be available eventually in English, Czech, Dutch, German, and Italian. We are at the end of the translation stage and just about to start the validation stage. I'm going to extend a little bit on translation because it's not an easy thing. As Peter Newborg, as you see in the bottom, is saying, there's no such a thing like a perfect, ideal, or correct translation. And that has to do with the fact that this is not a matter of words only, it's a matter of relating to the culture you're embedded in, so that the proper translation is one that transforms everything so that nothing changes, right? The traditional way of doing this is a forward-backward translation that often produces pretty literal translation. And that has the danger of missing subtleties and important aspects in the meaning. The methodology that we choose for this particular project is a dual panel translation approach, where participants in the panel are bilingual in the target language and fluent in English. Representatives of the developers are present, and this is followed by a process of lay panel for simplifying the patient-facing items in such a way that in addition, the translation are tested in the relevant targets group in a process called cognitive debriefing. So for those interested in the methodology that has been published in the context of a randomized study in 2010. There are different concepts of quality of life. Most commonly, to assess the impact of pharmacological interventions, we use health-related quality of life that is focused on symptoms and functioning and reflects in part the perspective of the healthcare providers. It's clinician-centric, if you want, and typically it's multidimensional. In contrast, needs-based quality of life assessment tools aim to focus on things that are important to the people affected by a disorder. Things like autonomy, identity, the change in roles and the like. So it's patient-centric. And it aims for a unidimensional interval scale. I'll explain that in a while, what that implies. We are interested in this in the context of this project because it can be applied both to pharmacological interventions as well as to non-pharmacological interventions, counseling, psychotherapy, support, and the like. Just to emphasize the concept of this needs-based, life gains quality from your ability and capacity to satisfy their needs. That's the basic tenet, the basic concept. And disease interferes with this. And also the treatment of the disease. Think of side effects of cancer treatments, for instance. Interferes with the individual's ability to meet their needs. And that implies impact on quality of life. So symptoms, science, and functional limitations, what we typically as healthcare providers measure in various scales, are important from that perspective insofar as they prevent need fulfillment. So they are, if you like, an holistic assessment of the impact of the condition and its treatment. And therefore, it's one dimension. It's not a profile of impairments, symptoms, signs. It's an index, one measure. That's the conceptual idea. So what is the process? And it starts with qualitative interviews with people affected by a condition to understand ways in which Huntington's is limiting a person's ability to fill their needs and how the disease does affect their life. These interviews are transcribed, analyzed, and the aim of the analysis is to extract content that reflects in statements a lack of need fulfillment. Thereby, we get insight which needs, and these are not the same needs that are affected by each disorder or each stage of a disorder, which should be emphasized and targeted. And that leads to a draft measure for each target group, large number of items that are then reduced, condensed, if you like, to an actual instrument. Here's an example. I cannot go to places where I want to go. That reflects your personal preferences, where you want to go, your religious needs, potentially, your friends, families, the entertainment, your work, and your aspirations. And it's important, just to illustrate the impact of the concept, that, for instance, the provision of a mobility device, like a walking frame, may enable you to go to places where you want to go, thus fulfilling a need, without altering the symptoms and signs or the functional impairment. It's compensating to some extent. So, being able to measure benefits, both from pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions, is, at least our perception, increasingly important, because it does reflect the reality that care is typically a multidisciplinary exercise. So here is an example where this could be applied to, aside from pharmacological interventions, various lifestyle factors, but also counseling and training needs. So, from these qualitative interviews, the impact of Huntington's on your role, the fear of the future, the burden on companions and caregivers is evident. Once an instrument is available, it's subject to rash analysis. That confirms that the scale that we develop are unidimensional and are so-called interval scales. Just to drive home what that means is, what you want is to have a ruler that looks like this, equally spaced between the various items, so that it means something if there is a change or increment. And that is achieved by applying the principles of the Rasch measurement model. So we ensure by this method that there are no misfits and explore whether the response format is working, and ensures that the measures are measuring what we intend them to measure. It can be applied pen and paper, it can be applied on smartphones, it can be applied on computer and laptops. We feel we need these type of new measures, and there's not a shortage of instruments otherwise of health-related quality of life, because for our reality, a multidisciplinary healthcare, we need new and clinicometrically sound, that is unidimensional interval level scales, and the ability, if we can, to measure true patient value for both pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions, and to generate disease-specific guidance with responsiveness for the assessment of health technology and for pricing eventually. So we want an instrument that is developed with the patients, patient-relevant, patient-centric, that for clinicians is one index, one measure, a holistic index of outcome, and for research, a clinicometrically sound instrument that is unidimensional and has interval-level data. That is needed is also the view of regulators. Here is a quote from Guido Rassi, emphasizing that there are different perspectives on the same thing, the disease, and it is important to integrate to understanding the thing that you are focusing on completely. So, in summary, we are in the process and close to delivering new HD-specific instruments that will allow a proof of concept for the delivery of digital services to HD patients and their carers to be tested. And this is just one example of the application. And of course, these measures, these four measures will be available for the HD community, researchers, as well as for those who run randomized controlled trials going forward. So that's the end of my presentation. Big thanks to all the participants in the effort, the persons with Huntington's, their companions, the volunteers who took part in the lay panel, and our partner institutions and all the people actually involved, Czech Republic, Jiri, Olga, Romana, Germany, Alzbeta, and Francie, and Stek in particular, Ireland, Jennifer, Mutu, Emer with the youngest participants she brought along with her, the youngest participant to the conference, 4 months.
4 months, yeah.
Nando from Italy, along with Barbara, Sabrina, and Eugenia, and Anvil, Suzanne, and Pearl, and the team in the Netherlands, as well as Ramona, Rona, and Anna, who is representing Galen Research. Where is Anna currently? So please, here you are. So if you have questions concerning the methodology, she's the person to go to. She's far better than me in explaining the details to you. Thank you very much.